Om Tare Tu Re Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. Om Tare Tu Re Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. Om Tare Tu Re Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. Om Tare Tu Re Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha.
Hello and welcome everyone to the Lama Live livestream event of Lama Sultrim Alione. I'm Dreamy, supporting you from Poland. What a joy to be able to reconnect with you here every week, joining from so many different places around the world. By the way, I invite you to say hello in the chat, as it's always great to know who is live with us this time. I'm thrilled to share that we have an end-of-life coach and home funeral guide, Rhonda LoPresti, as our guest teacher today. Rhonda is passionate in holding and creating sacred space, personal ritual, spiritual practice, and creative choices through dying and death care. Founder of Peacefully Prepared, Rhonda has evolved a Spiritual Care Directive for Buddhists. This 10-part signature process guides clients in planning out their end-of-life practice from their Dharma vision all the way through to the 49 days following death. Rhonda also encourages end-of-life wishes and planning in her 5-chapter notebook called A Passing Plan. A student of Tibetan Buddhism, Rhonda has studied under Chokinima Rinpoche for 35 years and serves as a board and volunteer member of Rangju Kyeshe Gombe, California. So without further ado, I'm very happy to welcome our guest teacher from San Diego, California, Rhonda LoPresti. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Dreamy. Thank you so much for making these precious Sundays possible for all of us in this really beautiful Tara Mandala community. And thank you to Lama Sultram for inviting me to be here with all of you today. So I just want to invite everyone to just let go of everything it took for you to get here to this time, to this sacred time we have together. Just rest and just bring your awareness to your breath and let it drop down deep in your belly and center yourself. And let's open with setting our motivation. Just checking that when we're coming here, that we can offer up that whatever connections we have, whatever realizations we have, whatever insights and joy we have in this time together, that we can offer it up to everyone, that we can offer it up to all beings. And so I want to open with a motivation out of my teacher's book, Sadness, Love, and Openness. And the motivation goes like this. What I am about to do now is something that has the power to overcome all my negative emotions and confused thoughts. It will lead me along a path that leads from one joyful moment to another, the direct way to liberation and awakening. I want to share that joy with all beings. And I'd also like to recite the 4 measurables together. So if you'll join me in, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings never be separate from the supreme joy that is beyond all sorrow. And may all beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So great. It's so nice to be here and be in this beautiful space with all of you. I have many, many Tara Mandala friends. I wish I could see all your faces. but I know that we're joined together and here to talk about end of life planning. And as we go through today, I really want to encourage you to share in the chat, share where you're calling in from, share. And if you have questions or comments, please include them in our chat today. So yeah, I'm Rhonda LoPresti, and I'm an end-of-life coach and a home funeral guide, and I'm joining you today from San Diego, California. And this September, we're going to be offering an 8-week session called Writing Your Spiritual Care Directive. And that's what I want to talk about today and get you inspired and excited. I'm so honored that Lama Tsultrim really sees value in writing your spiritual care directive for the time of dying. It's the Buddhist plan for the time of dying. And so it starts in September. I'm sure Dreme will provide all the details about that. And I'll be excited to see a lot of old friends and meet new friends as we come together for our 8 weeks. I also have a one-day intensive on the spiritual care directive in May. And so if you're interested, again, drop a note in the chat and let us know. Let us know that you're interested, or reach out to me. I'm sure Jeremy will provide all the ways that we can contact and stay connected with each other. So as an end-of-life coach, when I started coaching clients, it became very apparent to me how difficult it was to talk about death and dying, that people were not wanting to talk about death and dying. As I started out as an end-of-life coach, it was pretty challenging. And if I made headway with people planning for end of life, it was usually in the common 4 documents, which are your power of attorney, your medical care directive, your trust, and your will. And even then, even for people that were interested in those 4 documents, the follow through was really uncommon. People would start their documents and they'd only get halfway, or they'd start them and never sign them. And I'm wondering if there's some of you out there that have experienced that. I know I have. I actually completed my documents and never signed them for a couple of years. So there's just a real resistance and a challenge to follow through with our end of life planning. But the one thing I noticed more than anything else was that people weren't planning for their spiritual care for end of life. They weren't completing any kind of document that expressed their wishes, their practices, their rituals, their preferences, their choices around their spiritual care for end of life. And so as a result, I evolved what's called a spiritual care directive. And in the one that I promote and encourage, there's 10 parts where we literally start with your vision and move all the way through to grief and the end of life, beyond your death care. And so we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk a little bit about planning, and then I thought we would talk about maybe the first 2 parts of the directive, which will be about Dharma vision and aspirations, or your wishes around dying. And then we'll end with a meditation, like a dissolution of elements meditation. So one of my favorite slogans is planning is an act of kindness. I say that all the time. You'll see it on all my Facebook posts and my website. Planning is an act of kindness. End of life planning is an act of kindness. And the reason I say that is because it takes our time and our energy and our love and our attention to plan for something that's so far in advance. We're actually planning for our future self, and we're planning for those we love. And so to do that in advance is a real act of love and care for those that we want to prepare. By planning in advance, we spare people so many unnecessary sufferings, distress, confusion. By planning in advance, it's a gracious activity. We can create virtuous scenarios for our loved ones. And so let's think about this. For many people, many people haven't given it much thought, actually. In this culture, we're very death illiterate. We're very death phobic. We're not giving much thought to our planning. Planning is rare. It's very rare. It's not the cultural norm. We're not so fortunate we're in a culture where it's not so fortunate. We're not feeling acknowledged or accepted or inspired to talk about death and dying. We don't have community held rituals that we can rely on. We're not that are intentional or ritualized or practiced. And I do like to say, I think dying is a skill. Dying can be learned, but it's difficult to talk about. Dying is difficult to talk about. And so if we can come together in a group and we can work on a spiritual care directive, we can learn from each other. We can build language for it. We can build patterns and positive scenarios for our dying. We all know that dying is wrought with difficulties and challenges, conflicts and missed opportunities. I know one thing that came up for me in planning my death and dying is I felt very, very far from my teacher and far from my monastic community. That came up for me as a practitioner, and I'm wondering if it's coming up for you. Many of us feel isolated. We feel remote. We feel far from support. And so by writing a spiritual care directive and sharing it with our friends and family, we're building community. We can cultivate these relationships. I know that for many of us, our practices are in our heads and in our hearts, right? But we've never shared them. We've never actually shared them with our family or friends. That happens for some of us. And so by writing a spiritual care directive, you can actually be writing down your heart practices. You can be sharing what's meaningful for you and that would support you and carry you through death and dying. Many of us have negative scenarios, resistances, and biases from the death stories that we've experienced that weren't really held in loving ways or with a cultural holding. And so we can come together and write a spiritual care directive and begin addressing those wounds and addressing that healing now so that it's not showing up at the last minute when we're facing our own dying. And also it can be really hard to be creative and to explore our options at the time of dying. I mean, we see very, very often at the time of dying, people will suddenly become even more interested in their spiritual practice. They want even more comfort and even more connection. And unless we've practiced for some time, unless we've practiced our lives or practiced for years or even practiced for months and made it a habituated place of refuge, a habituated place of a source of comfort, it can be very difficult to access at the last minute. As a matter of fact, when we're dying, we may be so distracted by a cascade of other demands, whether it's pain, fear, unresolved relationships. It can be really hard to access any kind of creativity or options or support under that avalanche at the last minute. So planning is really, really important. And so I invite all of my clients and I invite you to think about where in your life can be where can you be accumulating more death education, more knowledge. We We are at the receiving end of precious teachings. Many, many of us have so many precious teachings that we are so fortunate to have access to at this time. And so we can really continue to grow that knowledge, that death education. We can learn more about end of life practices. We can study the active phases of dying. We can study the bardos. We can study the liberation instructions. We can study aspirations. We can learn how to manage suffering. We can learn how to manage our mind when we're really afraid. We can learn how to open our hearts and communicate with our loved ones. And by writing in a spiritual care directive and being possibly in a group where you're sharing it with others and cultivating those relationships, we can normalize talking about it. We can watch each other and see how other people are talking about death and dying and the phrases they're using and the language they're using, and we can start building our repertoire of words and phrases and ways to share. I know recently in a class we shared the expression, I really hope that I can be there for a practitioner and hold their liberation above my personal feelings. And that was such a beautiful expression of how we can show up for ourselves and for others at the time of dying. So we can normalize it. We can come up with new language, new words, new phrases. In writing your spiritual care directive, we can share it with those we love and build our community and our support. We can face our wounds and our biases and our memories of things that maybe didn't go so well in the past and nurture them and create new positive scenarios. We can be creative, and we can develop our certainty. We can develop our certainty about how we want to talk about this. Many of us have family and friends that don't share our faith, and we can feel afraid. We can feel afraid to talk about end of life plans. But by being together and planning and articulating in advance, we can build our certainty in how to talk with each other, which reduces so much suffering. Really, that's what impassions me about working with end of life. Building our certainty about our practices and applying it. I really like the Dalai Lama uses this a phrase, has said, I found in one of his books, he says, we're only going to need two things at the time of dying. We're going to need what we can remember, and we're going to need friends to help us remember what we want to remember, which is so beautiful. And so be thinking about that. What is it that you want to remember at the time of dying? And what do you want your friends to help you remember? And write these down. And so now I'd like to move in to share a little bit about the Spiritual Care Directive. I'm hoping that people will put something in the chat so that we can start hearing from you. Questions, comments, where are you calling in from? Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Spiritual Care Directive. Out of 10 parts, let's just talk about 2 of them today. One of them would be, it's really beautiful to start with Dharma vision. What is your Dharma vision for dying? You know, most people haven't even thought about it, actually. Sometimes we can just stop and think, you don't even know. And some of you have ideas. You actually have some ideas about a vision. And so think about that. What are your beliefs? What are your ideas about death or the active phases of dying? What kind of ideas or beliefs do you hold? You might even want to get a piece of paper and a pen at this point. And let's just start with these first 2. What's your vision? We'll talk about vision and then we'll talk about aspirations. What's your vision? And write down some sentences. How would you like your environment to be? One of the most common things we hear people say is, I would like to die at home. That's great. Write that down. I would like to die at home. Or some people might say, I want to die quietly, alone, and with no adornments and no elaborations. Great, write that down. That's very powerful for people to know. What would help you look forward to dying? That's a great question. What are ways you can rehearse your dying? There's many practices and meditations and visualizations that are offered by our great teachings. How can we rehearse those? Do you have a favorite one? Write it down. I know in my spiritual care directive, for example, one of the first lines on my Dharma vision says, I've been practicing for the time of death my whole life, so please don't worry too much when it comes or under what circumstance. So what would it be like for you? What would you write down in your directive? Who would you like to be with you? What friends? What do you want to be feeling or thinking about at the time of dying? Would you like to have a view of the sky? Is it important to be in a room full of candles? Would you like to be set in a forest? These are all, write them down. What do you want to be thinking at the time of dying? And of course, there's many other things you can write about. Is how do you feel about medications? How do you feel about suffering? How do you feel about, do you have an interest in home funeral? Would you like to be kept at home for hours or days after death? How do you feel, of course, about burial and cremation? But even more than that, what kind of rituals mean a lot to you that you would that would be of benefit, again, not only to yourself, but for all of those holding space for you, for all of those that would be touched by knowing just how to show up for you. Again, this is an act of kindness. It's very common for people to feel very helpless at the time of dying, to feel like they don't know what to do and they don't know what to say. And it's such an act of loving kindness to be able to offer your practices to your friends and family so that they have something that they can engage in and they can be there with you and for you. So I'm going to just stop there for a moment on our Dharma vision and just check. Dreamy, are we getting any chat? Because I'm not seeing anything on my window. I just want to make sure. Yes, great. Okay, good. I wanted to feel some love. And so, okay, good. All right. So I'm so glad you're out there. So be thinking about that. I'm wondering, maybe someone could put in the chat a word or a phrase that might relate to their Dharma vision. What would be something really important to you? For many people, it's reaching out to their teacher. Reaching out to their teacher at the time of death so that their teacher can hold them in their heart and offer practices for them like POA. And so it would be very difficult for someone to maybe find your teacher at the last minute. I mean, we're across, often we're across time zones or on the other side of the planet. And so it can be very difficult, extremely difficult to reach out to a teacher at the very last minute. So in your spiritual care directive, there's a whole place of placing your contacts with instructions at the time of dying. Please inform my teacher, let my teacher know that I'm dying, so that you can access that support. When we create a vision, we're doing all kinds of amazing things where we can create positive scenarios. We can reduce our negative biases. We can actually calm our central nervous system. They say that when we create visions that really are in alignment with our beliefs and our values, it It calms our parasympathetic nervous system. Writing down our wishes helps us clarify what's really valuable and important to us. It inspires us. There's just so many benefits in writing these down. And you can do it, in sentences, in chicken scratches, in paragraphs. There's so many ways you can write. So be thinking about your Dharma vision. And, people will often say, well, we don't necessarily die in just the way we want to die. And that's so true. There's such an element of surrender when we're in the process of dying. But if we've thought about these scenarios, and if we've really thought about the ideal, our ideal visions for how we want to die, it can be transferable. We may be able to live into the vision that we've created. And if we aren't in that particular ideal scenario, maybe we find ourselves in something radically different. At least we've anchored deeply in our being what's important to us. Yeah. So I'm seeing in the chat, in your vision, to feel the support of prayers from loved ones. Yes. To be able to feel safe and to be able to practice. Yeah, that's so beautiful to have in your spiritual care directive. And so in your Dharma vision, you would write down, what are your heart practices? What are practices maybe you've been practicing your whole life? And then that way your friends can join you in those practices at the time of dying. Yeah. I mean, wouldn't it be beautiful if a Dharma sibling was whispering in your ear your heart practice? But we don't know how to do that, or we don't know what practices to do unless you tell us, right? Unless you write it down. So yeah, that's so good. Yeah. So your vision, and make it big. Dzongkhar Khyentse Rinpoche says, make your vision of dying big. Like, go all out. Like, really think about it. Think about the environment. Think about the people. Think about the state of your mind. All the supports. Yeah, so good. So that's just start. And I always tell people, make your vision an open file. Leave it open because it'll evolve. We don't have to have this all figured out right now. This is an evolving practice, but we got to start somewhere. And I always tell my clients, write something down today so that in case you need it tomorrow, actually, we might need it tomorrow. So many times people will say, well, I have a vision in my mind and I'm really working it out, and I'll write it down when I'm on retreat next year. Well, I say, that's great. I would love for you to spend some time on your retreat next year. But today, give me 5 sentences, because we just may need it before your retreat next year. So Dharma vision, it's an open file. It's an evolving vision. It's transferable. Even if it doesn't kind of go according to plan, at least we've really anchored in what's important to us and our virtues. Yeah, I hear all the time that how it's so difficult for me to plan for dying when I've just started living, actually. But that's okay. That's okay, because how we live is how we die. And that's one of the most amazing things. I know this was true for me. When I started writing my spiritual care directive, it actually inspired the way in which I live. It actually inspired my practice. My practice completely changed. I just went into it in a very new and different way once I started writing it down and actually applying it for the time of dying. So yeah, just it can be kind of it's a loop. It has a looping effect. Living and dying, dying and living. They feed each other, and so just getting into that flow. It's really, really powerful. Let me talk a little bit about the second the second step on the journey through a spiritual care directive that I promote is our aspirations. And I think of aspirations as all the ways in which we make wishes, all the ways in which we make wishes that help guide our practice and help guide our mind and help guide our heart. And there's so many traditional aspiration prayers for the time of dying. And if there's one that really touches your heart, I know we practice it. We're practitioners. We're practicing things. Write it down on a page. These are my aspirations for the time of dying. And these are my traditional ones. Let's say you recite the King of Aspiration prayers and you do this regularly. Write that down, because that is something you're familiar with. That's something that you've been training with. And if your friends were around you to recite that at the time that you might be unconscious or transitioning, that would be really, really powerful. And there's so many aspiration prayers that we recite. And it's really powerful to recite them in groups. So if you have a favorite traditional aspiration, I highly recommend find a group so you can recite it regularly. That's really, really powerful to do it in a group. I'm seeing in the chat, what if I feel like I would prefer to be alone? Yeah, write that down. Write that down. And even express, say more. That's what I would say to that. Say more. What is it about being alone? How is that resourceful for you? What is it that invites you to lean into being alone? Talk about it, share it, because people won't know. People at the time of dying, when people begin to gather, there's a lot of hearsay, and there's a lot of people are trying to remember what you preferred and the decisions you made. And sometimes it's all just in rumors, actually. And so people are confused and distressed. And so I would say, write that down and elaborate more about it. Because when you can't speak for yourself and you become completely dependent on others, those who will take care of you can really be nurtured by the writings you've left behind. I see another one, to not be over medicated or be medicated at all. That's a great one when it comes to our Dharma vision. How you feel about medication. Yeah. And to write that down. Some people want to be heavily medicated. They don't want to experience any distress, right? There's a whole range of how people can feel. Everything from completely want to be medicated to someone who doesn't want to be medicated at all, and all the spaces in between. And so maybe finding for yourself where you are. So in the case of I don't want to be medicated, that's great. Write that down. You might even get more refined in that, like please only medicate me if I ask for it, for example. Or I've been training in suffering for many years, and so I value my suffering. And if you see me suffering, don't be too distressed. This is my practice. That might be related to medication in a really devoted and dedicated way. Or you could talk about your body language around pain. If you see me grimace, that's not a request for medication. Maybe you could even set up certain body languages that are a request for medication. And so just continuing to refine that's so good in your vision. I think talking about, especially in this culture, right? In this culture, we hear all the time, I just don't want her to suffer. Like we hear that all the time, right? That's kind of a mantra. And I've been doing a lot of education around that, it's okay if you see me suffering. I use my suffering to take refuge. I use my suffering to be present. I use my suffering. I welcome my suffering. I have non-resistance around suffering. I'm seeking a comfort beyond my suffering. I'm using my suffering for the benefit of all beings. I'm using my suffering to empathize with all who suffer. I'm using my suffering to let's see, there's just so many ways I'm using my suffering to pay off old debt, old karmic debt. There's many reasons why someone would take a position of having absolute non-resistance, non-fixing, non-escaping around suffering. So that's a really big topic, and we can be writing about that. Yeah. So let's just talk about aspirations really quickly here, because I said I was going to do two parts of the first two parts of the directive are aspirations. Again, what are your practices that you do that touch your heart? Write them down. What are your favorite mantras? What is your emergency mantra? When something happens suddenly and unexpectedly, what do you want to be able to say? What do you want to have be your default response? And this is probably a mantra that you recite all the time, right? Because in order for something to be our default reaction, it's something that lives in us. It's something that's deeply anchored in us. And maybe for you, that's the name of your teacher. So write that down. Maybe you recite your teacher's name all the time in your devotion and love. Maybe you recite the names of the Buddha. Maybe you recite your Tara mantra or other mantras. And so on a page of aspirations, write those down. What is really meaningful for you? What has touched your heart, so that your family and your friends can create an environment that reflects that back to you and feeds them, always feeding them. It's such a benefit when people have things they can participate in at a very distressing time, like the time of dying. Another really good thing on your aspiration, when you're thinking about your aspirations, is what would you like to have? What would you like your last thought to be? Your last lucid thought. Think about that. What do you think other people's last thoughts are? We can share these. We can learn from each other. We can develop more and more ideas together when we're thinking about these things. So aspirations are so powerful. And write them down. Many students will write down the 4 measurables, which we just recited at the beginning of this talk. The 4 measurables. So beautiful when practitioners hear that. It's so comforting, and so it turns our mind in just the way we hope our mind can be turned, especially at a time of stress and distress, time of dying, possibly. So let's see in the chat. Yeah, make your decisions, write them down on your piece of paper. So today, if nothing else, you can write about your Dharma vision. You can write down some of your aspirations. And I would say write down, I would like to be buried. I prefer to be cremated. I would like to be transported to recompose up in the state of, I think it's Washington. I would like natural burial. There's so many ecological new options now that are amazing. And so we don't know what we don't know. And so by really spending some quality time, some committed time to end of life planning, we can see that we have many options. We can learn from, we can increase our death education, and then we get to see that there's so many decisions that can be made, and we can alleviate those decisions weighing too heavy on our family and our friends. Yes. So write your aspirations down. I will offer a, I think that's a lot. I think that's a lot to start with. And I would like to lead us in a short meditation so that we can kind of take in and let all that we've just heard and thought about kind of settle. Yeah. So this is kind of a dissolution of the elements meditation. So I'm just going to invite you to rest in your chair and relax. Just really give this to yourself. Just about 5 minutes. Give this to yourself. Just adjust your body and breathe. Take slow, gentle breaths. Feel your feet touching the floor. Just let any tension go down into the ground. And spend a moment refuge in your teacher and in your teachings and in your companions on this path. And generate the bodhicitta, the motivation to practice this meditation for the benefit of all beings. And if you'd like, you can close your eyes or just cast them down. And just notice the solidity of the body, the weightiness, the heaviness, the bones, the muscles, the tissue, the element of earth sustaining the body, the container of this life force. And with your next exhale, just let the earth element go. And notice the fluidity of the body, the waters, the liquid, the dampness, the wetness, the element of water sustaining the body, the moisture of this life force. And with your next exhale, just let the water element go. And then notice the heat of the body, the warmth, the temperature, the ignition. The metabolism, the element of fire sustaining the body. The blazing nature of the life force. And with your next exhale, just let the fire element go. Notice the movement of the body, the breeze, the gustiness, the stirring, the element of wind sustaining the body, the flowing of the life force. And with your next exhale, just let the wind element go. And just notice the vastness, the openness, the spaciousness, the element of space sustaining the body, the spaciousness of this life force. And with the next exhale, just let go into that spaciousness. We do not know how long this body will last. We do not know when this exhale will be our last. We do not know how much time or how much longer we have. And so in this moment, just follow the exhale. Just follow it to its end. Let it cease. What happens there? Linger there. Rest there. And when you're ready, come back into the space, the wind, the fire, the water, and the earth. Back into this body and back into this space together. It's so good to be together here. I'm just looking in the chat. Let's see here. Yeah, I can see in one of the chats, it's hard to know how to go where one isn't wanted. I can really feel into that. That's that can be really, really painful. And you know, there's so much we can do remotely, actually. And we can make the aspiration, you know, that unwelcomeness changes. And so just thinking about those two things, you know, from wherever you are, you can practice and pray for your mother, your family member. You can practice and pray for them remotely. You can make offerings. You can dedicate your practice to your mother if you're far from her. You can imagine her and just imagine the blessings raining in and just showering her. And again, yeah, making the aspiration that there's an opening and that there's an opportunity for a connection. So I see that and feel that. So and getting support, getting ideas and support from others on how to do that, how to love someone remotely. And I would love a sky burial. Yeah, that's not so common. I sure would. I mean, I know that there's more and more options growing. I haven't seen sky burial yet, so I'd be willing to hold a conversation more in depth around those options. I see someone else loving their brother with stage 4 cancer that does not have a spiritual practice. Suggestions to invite him into his Dharma vision. Yeah, I mean, we can hold this conversation for anyone in any faith, really. You know, asking our loved ones what's comforting to them. I was with a beautiful, most precious young lady last year, and she had a love of dolphins. And I found myself when I was with her playing her the sound of dolphins and sending her video clips of dolphins. I had a fantasy that I wanted to project dolphins across the ceiling of her room, but just tuning into like what is nourishing, what feeds our loved ones, and then showing up for that. So beautiful. We can become so creative, really, in loving each other and sharing with each other. Just opening the conversation and being creative. Yeah. And someone's asking I'm going to be doing a 1-day intensive May 20th. May 20th, that's a Saturday. We'll go from like 9 in the morning till 6, and we'll go through the whole directive in an intense 1-day workshop. Is there green cremation? That's a really good question. We often do a little extra exploration around our disposition choices, and with cremation, it's been said that a cremation involves about 1 or 2 tanks of gas that you would use in your car. And so one thing that people can think about doing is limiting their driving in exchange for their cremation. There are other options right now being referred to as aquamation. And that is, so it's not a flame cremation, it's a water cremation that's now available in certain states here in the United States. So we can always talk about green choices and green options. So yeah, more and more is coming forward that we can learn about. Yeah. So any other questions, shares? What are you taking away from today? Yeah. I'm seeing, how can I help when someone finds out they have 3 to 6 months to live? It's a really, it's a beautiful question. I think it starts with connection and conversation. I think people are so nervous. We never want to say the wrong thing. We never want to make things worse. And what happens is we kind of avoid it altogether. But really, you can come forward with a dear friend and ask questions. The questions are amazing. Like, how is this going for you? What are you experiencing right now? What could really support you at this time? Being someone who's willing to listen, who's willing to bear the discomfort and be really present with someone. So opening the conversation, heart to heart, showing your genuine concern, being mindful of what's being triggered in you and what's coming up for you, and really checking that and being clear about that, and then being as present and open and available to your friend and your coworker as possible. Yeah, beautiful. Here's an affirmation from Louise Hay. Yes, I die peacefully and comfortably at the right time. Beautiful. That's a beautiful affirmation. There was a day I had my Spiritual Care Directive laying on the table, and one of my dearest friends picked it up and read the first few lines of my vision, and she started crying. And I was so moved and touched, and I asked her, I said, what's happening for you? And she said, when I read your Spiritual Care Directive and I see that you have this aspiration, like in this aspiration, I die peacefully and comfortably at the right time. And mine says, I've been practicing my whole life. Don't be worried too much. She said, reading this gives me so much comfort, being able to hear in your words what is meaningful for you, and that you would share it in this way. And that she said, and that you would do this for me, to comfort me. So that's why it's such an act of kindness. When we share these things, we are extending this benefit to those around us and comforting them. It's really, really beautiful. Yeah, I mean, by writing your Spiritual Care Directive and being in a group, whether it's your friends or in a discussion group, and we can really get beyond our own discomfort, and we can really find that settled, anchored, grounded place within ourselves, then we're able to show up in that kind of space to those who are dying. And so I can see in the chat, yes, to be able to just show up and be present and hold the beauty of eyes between a father and a daughter. I mean, that is true fathering. I like to think that we are always mothering and fathering those around us and our children, even when it comes to dying. When you are going through your dying, you are still mothering and fathering all of your children or friends or family in how to go through this most exquisite transition in this lifetime. Yeah. So, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been such a joy. I just want to dedicate the merit. I'd like to gather together everything that that touched our hearts, all the goodness, the relaxation, the peace, the comfort, the community. I want to gather it all together and offer it up for the benefit of all beings. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dream.
Thank you so much, Rhonda, for offering your time and wisdom to us today, for pouring some light into such a challenging topic and helping us understand how to navigate the end-of-life journey with compassion and kindness. I took the Writing Spiritual Care Directive course with you the last time, and it was just so incredible. Thank you for that, and thank you for our time today. And dear audience, thank you for your presence, for your active participation. We're always so happy when you choose to spend your time with us. And we hope it was inspiring and very informative to you. And we encourage you to continue this conversation beyond this event. In our Tara Mandala network, we have a safe space dedicated to open sharing about aging and illness that you are invited to join if you're interested. And by the way, there will be a special gathering held for the members of this space. In an hour from now at 12 p.m. Mountain Time, we are meeting on Zoom for a Dharma talk with Ellen Booth Church, who is a senior Tara Mandala teacher, has been practicing Tibetan Buddhism for over 30 years, and is a longtime student of Lama Sultram Alyone. This event is open to all and free to attend, and we believe that this Dharma talk will be also of great value to you, and we encourage you to participate if this topic is resonating with you. To do so, simply join us on Tara Mandala Network, and all information is available there. Also, Rhonda is there, so it's like one of the ways to stay in touch. I'll now post the link in the chat. All right, and now, following the tradition going all the way back to the time of the Buddha 2600 years ago, you have the opportunity to make an offering of dana to Rhonda LoPresti. Dana is a Pali and Sanskrit word that means generosity. Offering dana creates an auspicious connection and is a beautiful expression of the interdependence between teacher and student. Dana directly recognizes the precious gift of the teacher and the teachings, without which one could not practice the Dharma. If you would like to offer dana, please follow the link you will see in the chat in a moment. Thank you so much, everyone. May we meet again and again on the path, and may all beings benefit everywhere.
Om tare tu re, Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. Om tare tu re, Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. Om tare tu re, Mangalam Shri Mahapani Swaha. Om tare tu re.